Put that coffee down.
I'm not here to waste your time, okay? I certainly hope you're not here to waste mine. So I'm gonna keep this short.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
The most valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
Coffee's for closers only.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Behind Your Back podcast with me, Bradley Hartman, founder and CEO of the Behind Your Back Sales Company. And on this podcast, we talk about leadership, personal productivity, time management, and the craft of selling in the construction industry. And in this one episode, we're going to cover almost all of those topics I just mentioned, because the overall topic we're talking about here today is succession. That's right. I'm thrilled to bring to you today my conversation with two special people as we talk about succession. And that is Mr. Brian McCoy, Chairman and CEO of McCoy's Building Supply, the billion-dollar lumber building material dealer based in San Marcos, Texas, and his daughter, Meagan McCoy Jones, who's currently the president and COO, who will be taking over for her father next year. I was honored to be asked to host this conversation with Brian and Meagan at the 135th, can you believe that? 135 years at the annual convention of the Lumbermen's Associations of Texas. We met up on September 14th in Frisco, Texas at the Star, where the Dallas Cowboys practice, and it was here that we got into this topic of succession. Now, if you are interested, you can go back and listen to episode 48, which was released in October of 2018, which all of a sudden feels like an awfully long time ago. That was my initial conversation I had with Brian and Meagan. Now fast forward to today, and you'll get a really interesting understanding of the dynamic between these two individuals and how they're passing on the business from one to the other. Now, Brian has been actively involved with McCoy since the age of 17. Yard hand, truck driver, floor sales, assistant store manager, merchandise manager, VP, co-president, and president are all positions he has held during the past 47 years at McCoy's. He currently serves as CEO, which he will be passing along to Meagan next year, and he is the chairman of the board of directors. Now, Meagan is the fourth generation to work for McCoy's, and like Brian, she grew up at McCoy's and has worked as a receptionist, advertising intern, and has shadowed in various departments at headquarters, becoming acquainted with the many aspects of the family business along the way. While in graduate school, Meagan began working part-time at the Georgetown, Texas location and realized what always was interesting to her as a kid was indeed her true passion, the business and the people of McCoy's. Meagan served as assistant store manager, director of corporate development, vice president of field support, and senior VP and chief operating officer prior to her current role as president and COO. Now, in this conversation, Brian and Meagan were very generous and they were very candid. We talked about what courageous communication looks like, and we talked about how Brian intentionally enlisted the help of other key executives to help his daughter progress and be ready to take on the CEO role. Meagan provides some wonderful advice for the young, ambitious, impatient next generation who's anxious to take over and make some changes of their own. And Brian shares his own succession story, taking over for his own father. And he talks about the real lean years in 1997 when Home Depot was opening stores every which way and the business really looked in peril, only to come back stronger. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation on the topic of succession with Brian McCoy and Meagan McCoy Jones. As always, thank you for listening. Brian, Meagan, welcome to the stage. Thrilled you guys are here. I'm just fascinated about this entire succession process. Does anyone, very different than what's happening, I'm sure, in your family. Does anyone watch HBO Succession? Very different show. Very different than the culture at McCoy's, I'm sure. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Succession, HBO?
It's super dark.
It's very dark.
We watched a little of it, my husband and I were like, I feel like it's too dark for us.
It was dark. The language is a little rough. Anyway.
I have not seen it.
I have not
and
seen
you don't
it.
need
No.
to
I don't
watch
think you
it.
should see it.
I have
think
no
you should stay
idea
away
what
from
you're
it.
talking about.
No. But I'm excited to talk to you guys about succession here. And they say the past is prologue, Brian, and I was just very curious about what this process was like when you took over for your father. Would you mind sharing just a little details about that?
Oh, you bet. Before I do that, Bradley, I want to just say we got a room full of privately held and family businesses and also our support team with associates here. So It's really special. I'm a champion for private business and just thrilled about that. I worked for my dad for the first half of my career. I guess it was really 22 years right out of college, and never really knew anything different than that. I will say he was really wise that when my brothers and I were coming up, working in high school, and in college, we were always working for others, not him. I think that was really appropriate. We talked about business around the dinner table all the time, so I grew up with that mindset. But one of the things that happened, and my father was an outstanding businessman. I mean, no question about that, and great example on so many fronts. He had high integrity. He had a great business plan, put it to work. He put us to work and a whole bunch of people. The longer we went, the more our business plan got a little challenged. And the older my brother and I at that point, just my brother and I, our younger brother had passed away. The older that we got, the more independent thinking we were. It's interesting how that is. And I think that recipe of some of our long-term business plan under my dad being challenged some by Home Depot and Lowe's in an ever-increasing way, and then also our own thoughts about making that change. My father was not opposed to change, but we were fighting about the rate of change. So with that, we were having a once-a-year sort of family meeting on a Saturday, and he came into our office a little early, sat down in my office, as a matter of fact, and he said, I've got to say, he was 74 at the time, and he said, it's just not quite as much fun anymore, and I'm going to pass it to you and Mike on Monday. And the family he and my mother had about a fourth interest in the business, and we did a transaction there, a buyout and so forth. And, my father made that transaction really easy. I think he was wise in that he realized it was time to pass the torch, but it was abrupt and it wasn't as smooth as we would have wished for. That put a big mark in my mind in terms of how we might do it differently.
To clarify, Friday,
Saturday.
Saturday. Dad rolls in, got a second. Monday, hard stop, you're in, I'm out. Obviously, paraphrasing the details here.
Yeah,
Brian, but
which, was both exciting and a little scary all at the same time. It was.
I can only imagine.
This
story, Meagan, how aware were you of this story kind of growing up and more recently?
So he mentioned that Saturday the family was gathered for a family meeting. We had just begun these all family meetings.
Okay.
So extended family.
Yeah.
And y'all came in after having met with him that morning and announced to the whole announced just whatever, an hour later, whatever, to me and my 9 cousins and aunts and uncles that was happening on Monday. And then actually, as I recall, I don't remember if it was this announcement or another one, I was really young. My first job at McCoy's was as a receptionist, so, no email and voicemail. So all business came through the phone. So answering the phone felt like a very important job. I was 10 or 11 or 12. And so I think I came in later that day after school, if I recall, to work the phones while he made the company announcement. I don't remember if it was that or another event, but very aware. Yeah, very aware.
That's incredible. So
in the room.
I'm going to ask you a question here. I'm looking for 2 numbers from each of you, just 2 numbers. So as you've thought about this process that is now coming to the end,
Right.
In your mind, what was this range of numbers? The first number, like the shortest end, this would be this number of years. The longest it would take would be this number of years.
To make the transition, you mean?
Correct, exactly. What would be your 2 numbers there?
You want me to go first?
I think you should. Yeah.
I think in the shortest way, candidly, we've had enough family tragedy through the generations that I think part of us have always played out in our head what happens if something happens to somebody. Yeah. So probably in the shortest way, I would have thought through what happens tomorrow, and I would not prefer that. And then I probably thought in the longest way 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 24 hours, 5 or 6 years. Brian?
I think one of the things my dad realized, though, is he had enough integrity to know that he wasn't willing to be deferring to us. And so I think that came out with that quick decision that said, I've got Mike, my older brother, and I were under him and running big parts of the business and such, but it was that integrity that said, I need to now just be done with it, if you will. And actually, that was a really serving thing to us, but it wasn't the way we would have wanted. I would have loved for us to have been talking about this for several years and such. As an example, I will tell you, my dad made that decision as CEO of the company. He was 74 years old, and I just told myself that that's a little bit too long to be in that role. And so when I pass my position on to Meagan next May, I'll be 67 at that time. I'll continue as chairman of our board, and I'll work some part-time hours for sure. It's hard to just give it up completely, but I will tell you that it's time, and I sense that. And we've worked, I know Meagan needs to share about this, but we've worked quite a few years now for that coming day next May. So we're excited about it and really, really thrilled about it. And, you know, as we speak of family, I know this is a room full of family businesses in a lot of ways, and it's hard when you struggle and you also love the person that you're struggling with. So anyway, we've been on that journey, and I'd do it all again in an instant, but it's not always easy. Yeah.
Yeah. Meagan, as we were talking, you said one of the things that you've learned is kind of a first principle, if you will, of handling this and maintaining the personal and professional balance and eating together, all of that, is being courageous in your communication. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's really, I feel like that's probably your term that we all use now. I mean, in a short way, you have things you need to say to your family, and it doesn't get better if you don't say it, right? And so then there's a right place and time and audience, and the smaller the audience, the better. But I think we have, with your example, really taken the approach of we're going to talk as clearly and openly and often as possible and as it takes to try to talk through our fears and our concerns. And I think you've been really honest with me before about, in years past, hey, I don't think you're ready yet, but here's what I think it takes to get ready. You know, that would be an example of real courageous communication. Or probably one of the biggest fights Dad and I got in ever, which weren't very many, I can count on one hand. I had worked in the store, I had come through headquarters and kind of worked a little bit in every department. And then I came in, I had finished my tour of duty, a year and a half or whatever of working in all those departments, and I came into his office with like my printed list of things that I wanted to lead to make better. And I know you know me well enough to be chuckling at this. Of course, I was very organized about my list. I had a campaign for every item, and these are things that must be done, and they aren't going right, and I can help improve them. Dad was just insistent that the next thing to do was go be in management in the field. And I didn't really want to do that. We've made improvements to what those jobs look like, but back then they were even harder than they were now. I was a newlywed. They were long and hard, and I felt pretty unequipped for that. And I will never forget this. We argued back and forth, not in an explosive way, but just convincing each other of our points. And then,
Boy, can she debate.
you're welcome.
Congratulations.
I don't know. And you finally said to me, you know, I was a minority shareholder in the business then, and you said, you know, you own this business too, and I'm not going to tell you what to do. You need to make the best decision. And for all of you who are the children in the room, right, like that's the worst. Because now I have to make the right decision, and I can only be mad at myself for my own short-sightedness or whatever. And of course, it went on to be one of the hardest and yet best years of my career. There's probably not a single day I don't think about that day. And that crew, many of those crews still work for us. They're the ones who tell me with the most honesty what's really going on. Still, it's how I know to run our computer system. I can still run a register, though it very, very much stresses people out. I hadn't driven a forklift in a while, but I feel like I could brush up on those skills and still be pretty good. But you were just so right about that would be an example of either you were going to tell me what to do and that was going to be a more explosive thing, or you were going to have that feeling and not say it. And I wouldn't have gotten the experience I needed. So those are hard. I mean, they're just, they're hard
Megan,
conversations.
First off, your mom gave me some really good counsel there too. So,
Mom is the silent third person on the stage who has all the wisdom,
She's definitely the wise
so good.
woman.
She belongs here.
But I will tell you that was one of the hardest things I wanted to communicate to Megan too, because this I know. She needed to go to one of our really fast stores. She needed to be an assistant manager. I knew that she would go into an environment that was at times nasty, hard. People are unreasonable. She would be thrown into a situation where she would have all kind of stress like all of our members of management do, that she would be working harder than she ever did in her life. But there was only going to be one time in her life that she could do that. And because I had done that, I knew that that's what she needed to do if she was going to be. That was the quickest way to get her prepared for a more senior role in our company. So I think when we talk about courageous communication, that is just sharing what you think you truly believe in and know. And she was doing the same thing, and we were going back and forth. But I did appreciate the fact that truly, Megan's mom, she goes, well, you really can't make her do anything. I mean, we know that. So you kind of push it back over here. I want to say one thing about courageous communication, too. I'll give you an example just with my father, a coping mechanism for me, because this was way before he retired, and we were doing annual gatherings of our management team, and I wanted to do some professional development for our team members. And in fact, we wanted to do something for the marriages, for spouses. We had men and women in management with spouses and all that. And I remember we were going to gather together our team, and I wanted to offer up a workshop for those folks that were married in our company that were part of management. And that would mean them coming in a day early, and that we would provide that for them. And my dad said, well, fine, but that'll count as a vacation day for them. And I did not want them to have to burn a vacation day for that. And we went back and forth on that. He wasn't going to budge on it. And at some point I had to be able to say, yes, sir, to that. That's great. But my coping mechanism for that was because I respected and loved my father. But at the end of the conversation, I looked him square in the eye and I said, Dad, I just need to let you know that I'm going to be back in here next year, and I'll be asking for the very same thing. And he said, okay, that's good by me. And that was a respect between two generations. Right. I don't think if I could get that out, then I don't think I could be healthy enough then I need to let go of some resentment right then. Because he was the CEO, and he had that right to make that decision. And even family businesses have to have good governance. So to me, at least, I think that's important too, to respect the role also. So,
yeah, it's interesting coaching overly competitive 10U Texas baseball right now. I've learned you will sometimes treat your own child in a way that you would never treat any other child. And I imagine the same is true that if this was some other CEO and you were an executive and you had aspirations to the top job, the way you might be feeling comfortable enough to discuss this with your father would be entirely inappropriate in any other situation if there wasn't that family bond, Yeah. Interesting thing about family. I want to ask you guys just about, deservedly so, when there's this succession happening, a ton of attention and focus goes on two people. And yet, to run the operation you run, there's an awful lot of people. You mentioned your mother, your wife. I'm also just interested, Brian, what did you do to intentionally enlist the help of the rest of the executive team, as maybe this was in the early phases and maybe Megan and her ability was still very much an unknown quantity and a work in progress, as we all are?
Well, I guess it was, Megan, you can correct me if I'm wrong on some dates, but it was about 10 years ago. Megan was already a member of our executive team and was carrying a pretty good amount of responsibility, but I was leading a group at that time. We were all men. It was a team that we put together right after my dad retired. My brother and I selected them, and then my older brother Mike retired 4 years later. So I'm leading a team then that we had put together, but I benefited from the fact that most of the men on that executive team were at my age or a little older, actually. And so when we started kicking around the idea of being purposeful about succession, I needed to include them. But I'm going to tell you what the catalyst for that was. And then I want Meagan to weigh in on this. But I remember she was a member of our executive team for a good while, and we were enjoying that process and such. But wisely, she showed up in my life one day and she said, well, Dad, you know, who's going to be my executive team? I mean, she's looking at all of us and we're going to age out within a short window of time of years. And, you know, I kind of blew that off because 10 years ago, I was in my mid-50s. You know, I'm 66 today. So, but I have a really good friend who has always been a wonderful counselor to me. And I was relaying that story to him. And, you know, he laughed and chuckled for a minute, but then he got really serious with me and he said, now, Brian, he said, your daughter is right. Meagan is completely right. You need to start working on that. And that was the process that we started then talking about that. And Meagan, you might want to visit about that a little bit.
So I was, you know, as we were preparing for today, I went back into my files, and we have monthly executive team meetings. So the first time we talked about this with the whole team was 2012. And so I had my notes from that 2012 meeting. And, you know, you did me a real solid. First of all, you took the lead on that in front of that group. So it wasn't me taking the lead, which is a terrible way to go, right? Like, I'm gunning for all your job. I mean, it was just, you know, like, that has to be your responsibility, which of course you took. And you let off, and then you let me speak. And actually, you know, we're pretty off the cuff speakers in our meetings, but we had both really prepared kind of remarks because we wanted to be really thoughtful about what we said. And in your remarks, you made an appeal to, we want to look after our children. And one of the ways you can help me look after my children is to care about this process. Well, that was very significant. You know, how do you turn down a bunch of your peers asking them to support your children? And as I recall, and then I made some comments just asking for their help, of course, but as I recall, the meeting didn't go very well. I think because we didn't realize, maybe to your point, while we've been thinking about this, and maybe y'all are too, right? If you're in a family business that has lasted at least into the next generation, you are ingrained in you a generational thinker because you're a beneficiary of that. So you're thinking that long term. But a lot of people aren't. And I think it takes a long time for people to get comfortable with the idea that they won't be in this role forever, because that inherently begs the question, well, then what am I doing? And we probably underestimated the succession journey really was the whole team's journey, not just ours.
I think that's right. And, you know, we should have been a little more just focused on us rather than them, and then bring that into the process, I think, because the reality of it is, I mean, so many of you have long tenured members of your management that you so value and appreciate and love. And at the same time, their identity is a lot attached to our organization, and we are so grateful for that. I mean, I think any business that's prospering is a private business because we have such dedicated people working for us. But it was really good to get that out, and to get it out early, and to talk about it way in advance of the event.
Right.
And to let them know that, you know, I'm a part of that process. We're going to do this together. This team of men that I had worked with for a long time at that point, 12 years, but they were just members of that E-team at that time, executive team, for about 10 years. But some of us had, at that point in time, had worked together for 30 years and 25 years, and then we've added 10 more years on top of that. So that process has been hard. So succession, we think a lot just within the family, but it also impacts our team for sure.
Yeah. Maybe we'll stay here with kind of the executive team, and then obviously we'll circle back to the emerging leaders there. Many longtime leaders we've seen with our clients, they really struggle with kind of this process to work not only, Brian, in your role, but with the team. And it makes sense when we say everything you have today, power, responsibility, respect, all of those as we continue will go down. It's like, yeah, this doesn't sound good. I've worked really, really hard to get here, and I like it here. It's nice up top, right? And now we have to collectively wind down and look at these entitled, kids who grew up, you guys know them. This hasn't changed throughout history, by the way. Brian, what was your process to say there's intentional growth and exciting things beyond this. And you are very young, and there's a lot more to do and a lot more to accomplish. And this can't be the end if I'm 66, 67.
Well, Bradley, I got to tell you, I am.
He's so relaxed. Do you see how relaxed this
That's
gentleman
very
on my
relaxed.
left
Yes,
is?
This is true.
I did make this statement, especially as this transition was accelerating, and it came about the time that our board and I, the family, named Meagan as president, COO. Of course, as soon as we did that, everybody in town said I'm already retired. So, I mean, I'm still working full time. I mean, I get up pretty early, and some of y'all can attest to that. But I will tell you that I think the process is this, though. It was my job to start, as it relates to decision-making and responsibilities, it's my job over the last few years to diminish, and it has been Meagan's job for her to come up. And working with her is easy to do that. She is eager to take on responsibility. She is very capable. All those things have been, and it's really made it a lot of fun. And, you know, I think where perhaps 10 years ago, when she asked, what about my executive team, that was coming from a heart of being fearful, right? And my wise counselor said, you know, this is what we need to address. Because there's no givens in business, and we all take these risks, and they don't go away. And you know, one of the things that I did for Meagan, I think is important. I have probably said it multiple times over the last 15 years, but you need to say it to your successors too. But success for my daughter in business and in life is not the perpetuation of McCoy Corporation. It can't be. There's way too many factors as we move through time to know what will happen there. We are very proud of the fact that, you know, 6 more years and we're going to celebrate 100 years in business as a family. But there's just no guarantees there. That is not what I want to put on her. What I want to put on her, though, is this mantle that says, I'm going to pull together a team. She saw me do that and work with the team, and she's doing that with her team now today. And my job is to encourage. And I'll tell you, I've enjoyed a little more clear calendar, and I've been taking all my vacation days, and that hadn't happened for a lot of years, you know. And I'm so looking forward to that. I'm not worried about what all I've got to do. I mean, I've bought probably more books in the last 15 years. It's going to last me till I'm 95. And my wife and I, we just love to travel. And, you know, we've got some property in West Texas that I still haven't discovered totally. You know, I mean, I've got a bunch of things on that list. But one of the things I'm committed to doing till I breathe my last is I want to be her best encourager. And I really want to do that for my team and expect them to make mistakes, but we need to forget those fast and just move on. If you can't tell, I just love business. I mean, I really do. And it's been just a fun journey. So I am looking for that, looking forward to the change. And yes, it's been a little less demanding these days. It feels really good, Bradley. Thank you very much.
Well, I think something really powerful you said is that you needed to intentionally diminish or decrease, whatever verb you kind of use, but also at the same time, Meagan needed to very intentionally kind of ramp up. And I think if either one of those, the absence of it, right? Brian, you still say the same and still expect Meagan to come up. That kind of needs to be kind of in lockstep, kind of in concert to, I think, be really powerful. Meagan, I want to ask you, and maybe look at the flip side here for members of our audience that are looking at you and are saying, I can't wait till we get to there. Like, it might seem like forever.
Right.
For young, talented people that are looking to begin succession, there was a Deloitte & Touche survey that came out, and they talked about the next generation when they take over. Like, the percentages were all like 85 to 100, that they had ambitions to change the strategy, change the asset allocation, change part of their customer base, change the risk profile. And I can imagine being the older generation looking at me like, hey, we've done okay here. We're giving you something that you can grow. Right. How might you give them some advice? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but temper the expectation, or how would you tell them to continue forward until the time is right between both generations to make that transition of power?
Yeah, I love your question because I'm 39, turning 40 this year. I'm feeling very good about it. I'm told I'm in middle age. Thank you.
Early.
Early middle age. Thank you. I think 10 years ago, my list of change was longer and more aggressive because my felt responsibility for that success or failure was not as much as it is today. And so there does seem to be a relationship with your risk tolerance and your felt responsibility. And maybe some of you feel that, whatever side of that transition that you're on. I also think you gave me a lot of room to make changes that, they weren't $10 million changes, but they were small and incremental things. I'll give you one example. At the time, I was an assistant manager in the store where I was running with the manager and the team there. We were running all the deliveries for all of Greater Austin. It was in a time where we were still transitioning our business to learn how to serve the professional customer. We hadn't done that really well yet. So we had centralized all those deliveries out of one spot. But that meant, if you know your Texas geography, we were running deliveries from Kerrville far past Bastrop. Okay, so it really wasn't very efficient. So I'm talking about this with Dad because at the time we were doing that was also the time we were building up our selling team and our store teams and our delivery teams and our equipment. And so I kind of caught it at the right moment where there were other stores that were closer to those delivery locations that could be doing those deliveries more efficiently, certainly more profitably. And so I got permission to make that change, lead the change. Well, what I was also doing is killing the sales in our particular unit for the benefit of the company as a whole, which is actually exactly what we should all be doing at this level, right? Making the hard decisions for a particular branch or a particular project for the benefit of the whole. And, you really gave me permission to do that. That was a pretty emotional, complicated thing to do, but also it was relatively low risk. All those assets were bought, all those drivers were on, all that inventory was there. And so there were a number of those kind of smaller decisions. I wasn't deciding where to open a new store, I guess is the way I would put that. I wasn't making a $15 million investment decision. Well, that was really helpful. And then I think also, this isn't exactly your question, but one of the things I think we have done very well is make clear what decisions are in your lane and what are not. And my brother and I get to work together now too. He had a whole nother career in the Navy and the Foreign Service, moved back 6 years ago. He's a vice chair of our board. We joke like he can fire me, but I set his pay. Maybe it's the other way around. Anyway, so we have a good, and we're very close. We always have been. Well, he runs our real estate division. And so I am not making real estate decisions. We talk and consult and we get to the best conclusion, but it's really his decision. Dad held on to the capital budget for a long time, ran the capital budget for a long time. Appropriately so. Those are very, very big, expensive, and long-range decisions. So I got to run the operating budget. Well, you made some capital decisions. You made some I would not have made, for sure, because I wasn't willing to make the risk that were 100% the right decision. So I got to learn from that. But I guess what I'm saying is it takes two-way discipline. Whatever you're responsible for, be responsible for it. And then don't be like lobbing your, nasty criticism over there outside of it being just the two of you. It's interesting, Bradley, too. I think a thing that we've done as a family very well, we are a close family and we work hard at that and spend a lot of time together. But we're not, certainly never publicly or even in any sort of large group, critical of each other at all. And boy, that takes a ton of just discipline inside yourself not to do that, because you'll get over the hurt you have with that person faster than your people will. And then they're on your team and they're having to defend you, and that is a horrible use of energy. Yeah. So I created my own question.
Absolutely. As you talk about managing your emotions as you go through this process, for any of our audience members that might be wondering, in the past, I think I'm working on it, I've been accused of not being a person who apologizes well. Huh. Weird. I disagree. I apologize for nothing. For anyone in the audience, is there a ratio how many apologies you should be prepared to make per year? Just like mentally. Just start thinking about at least once a quarter. Brian, what number are you thinking right now?
Well, I kind of can pop off if we're doing some leadership training in our company, but I'll say if you haven't uttered an apology in the last 2 or 3 weeks, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, you're behind. We're just not that perfect, and we just have all these flaws, and it's just so hard. It is important, I think, to have your close circle be given the permission to say, you cross the line. You need that in your life, and you got to have, boy, and I'm going to tell you, her mom, my wife, is really good at that. And that's great, because I need more than just my conscience at times, So
2 to 3 weeks. Okay, I'm behind. I thought you were going to say 2 to 3 years, and I'm like, I think I'm good so far.
The discipline of an apology is the path of self-awareness, Bradley.
That sounds like a tattoo you have. Say that again? What was that?
The discipline of apology is a path to self-awareness. If you don't hurt from your mistakes, you will not change.
Hey, we know apologies are important. How many times do you screw up with a customer? I don't know. We did a lot today. But isn't it interesting when we can make a really good recovery, that is the recipe for some opportunity to have a really long-term customer. Right. We know that, right? Well, that works in families and it works in business too. And you just got to say, you got to take that word "but" out of the equation. You just need to fess up and apologize for it. Don't give any justification for it, and it'll get you a long way in life. I'm telling you. Yeah.
Sounds like wisdom. I'm making notes over here. This is good stuff. Megan, let me ask you. I'm watching the time here. We got a few more questions. Megan, what will you miss most about when the days of co-leading the company with your father?
I don't even think I could answer that without crying. I hope this isn't your last LAT meeting, but I know. Thank you. Thank you, Mireya.
The applause is ambiguous. I want to make it really clear. I think they want you to come back in the future.
I know. They do. We do. Yeah, I don't want to do it without you, Because the older you get, the bigger it feels, and the more you realize, yeah, it can be lonely up at the top. I wish my brother were here. He is an incredible human. He's the smarter of the two of us, incredibly talented. And part of why he came back is because we watched Dad do so much alone, and we're not going to let each other do this alone.
I really have a lot of
I hope he keeps coming into the office,
Well,
he keeps trying to give me his office, okay? He's like, Megan, this is the CEO's office. When I move out, you move in. I'm like, I'm not moving in here. Like, this is your office forever. So I'm telling all of you,
when I move out,
I hope you're there until you can't physically get in there.
But you cannot hurry family issues. In fact, that is a disastrous thing to do. I mean, if you're going to slow down somewhere, it needs to be with the people that you love the most. And so that's important. But I am comforted by the fact that Megan does have Reed, and they have been close since they were young kids, and it's been really special to watch. And I think, I know you wouldn't really take on this job with the kind of excitement and anticipation without Reed in your life, which is really important. I got to tell you a little story with my dad, and because our relationship really got stronger as he retired and he wasn't my boss anymore, Well, that's a new phase for us, and that'll be great. Because, you sit there and you say yes, sir, and no, sir. And, and he had a dad side, but it was always there. But when he retired, that was different. Then he had a stroke, and that was really different. But it was about 3 years after he retired, he and I were traveling to San Angelo. He had taken up a little bit of book collecting. He had befriended Elmer Kelton, a very famous Western fictional writer. And we were going to go meet Elmer and have Elmer sign some of his books. And so we're flying into San Angelo, and it's like, my rule is I don't care if you're on family business or whatever. If you're in town, and we're going to stop by and see our store, So this is the first time I've walked into a store, and I'm the CEO. And my dad is not. In fact, he's not an owner in the business. And we walk through, and we have a whole lot more product on the shelves than we ever did. And I commented to him that those doors over there, we made those in our plant.
Sold them on credit.
Didn't do it, and sold them on credit. And I didn't do it in a flippant way, but we go to the back, and those trucks have forklifts hanging on them now, at least a couple of them in that yard, and a whole host of of different changes. But we had a good visit, and he was visiting with a really long-term customer there. But so we get back in the car, and we're heading to the airport, and we're heading down the road a little bit. My dad looks over and he said, well, you're running a whole completely different business. Wait for more. That's the sentence. So there's this uncomfortable quietness. I am an optimist, I just want you to know. And so what I mustered up, I kind of went up in the seat a little bit, and I looked over at my dad and I said, well, sir, I'll take that as a compliment. And I don't know that my dad could ever really embrace all the change that we brought, but I can say this, he was always rooting for our success. So I felt that I want to do that for the next generation. That's my role, I think. And I just always take a lot of delight in the success of the family businesses in this industry. I mean, no question about it. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you both. I think it's a wonderful spot to end. You guys have been generous and candid, and thank you very much. All right, then. How did that go? I hope you found a lot of value in listening to my conversation with Brian McCoy and Meagan McCoy Jones of McCoy's Building Supply. Now, our goal here is to make this the best podcast you'll listen to, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, ideas for future shows, any potential guests, or any sort of builder scenarios you are struggling with. Do not hesitate to email me directly at bradley@behindyourbacksales.com. Again, bradley@behindyourbacksales.com. And you can link up with me on LinkedIn and connect on Instagram at BehindYourBackCEO. Now, if you did find this episode valuable, please share it with your network. And if you'd be so kind, leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts. Those mean more to us than you know. As always, thank you for listening. We're going to close out like we always do with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, you are owed nothing. Deliver value first.